Rev up your engines. All right, today we have the last of the Celicas. The last models that they put out. This is a 2003 Celica, and it's got an interesting story. The guy bought it when it was 12 years old with 75,000 miles for $7 grand. 200-something thousand miles later, he's still driving it as an everyday driver. Well, how can that be? Well, that's because just like my wife's Matrix, son's Corolla, and my 94 Celica that's back in Tennessee, they're all basically Toyota Corollas. They have different body styles, but they're using pretty much the same basic engines. The only thing that's fancy about this is it does have a 6-speed standard transmission in it, because the last models, they tried to make them a little bit zippier to turn them into more sporty cars, but that kind of bit Toyota in the rear end. The guy's a conservative driver. He's still got the original engine in this thing, even though it's got 322,000 miles on it. And it burns about a quart of oil every oil change. So that's not bad. My Celica burns half a quart in that amount of time. And it's got 240,000, and this has 322,000. It's still the original engine. I do have to say that's a record. I've never seen one of these original engines go that long. And that's because they put this fancy little engine in there that puts out horsepower at high RPMs. A lot of guys over-rev them. They didn't make the oil pan correctly. So if you're over-revving and cornering them, it sucks air instead of oil. The sump pump sucks dry for the oil, then the engines blow up. And I've had so many customers blow engines because of that. Now, there's ways around it. You can buy a different oil pan that's bigger, holds more oil, doesn't have that problem. But he's not driving like a maniac, so he hadn't had any problems with it. He just drives it normally. Well, he said most of the time he drives it normal. Now, being that it's a Toyota Corolla base, on the highway he gets 32 miles a gallon too. Now, one thing, he had an improved transmission done by a very good rebuilder. 6th gear went out. That often will happen on these things. A lot of guys will just drive them around with 5 gears, but like he said, in 5th gear on a highway, the RPMs are too high. It knocked out the gas mileage, made the engine buzz too much. So he went to Monkey Wrench Racing. Kind of spills off your tongue there, right? And he had him build a new transmission with better 6th gear. So that's how he gets the better gas mileage. Most people aren't going to get that better gas mileage on it because the ratio was made more for zooming and not for high-speed gas mileage. You can set up a car anywhere you want, and those guys set it up that way. Hey, you want it to last, it's an older car. Things are going to go wrong, and you don't want to ruin a car like most of my customers did with these when they blew the engines from over-revving them all the time. Check engine light on, we're going to check that later, but you consider all the mileage on this thing, it's held up pretty well. Now, except for this, which is kind of a funny story. You can see it's a different color. Now, he went to a Maaco to get the car painted, and unfortunately, they didn't make it the Mazda cherry red that he wanted, so they knocked off 2,500 bucks off the price. And this had a little rust. He got it from another car, but it was silver. And he tried to paint it to match, but since Maaco used kind of a weird color paint, he couldn't find a way to match it. Now, normally you can match paint if you get a good company. This particular one, Automotive Touch-Up, kind of a generic name, but that's the name of the company. You can see the symbol. I'm going to be making a video soon fixing my son's car. He scraped against a pole. You just go to the car and it's got the color trim. You get the color trim number, then you get the paint that matches. In this case, it's Toyota 8W7. Says so at the door, but in this case we have no idea. He asked for one color, he got another one. It was probably custom blended for Maaco, so it's going to be real hard to match that paint. I'm thinking maybe if he wanted to make it look cool, he could take it off to a chrome plating place and have it chrome plated, and he'd have a chrome one that'd kind of match the wheels. Now you look at the interior, you can see it is an everyday driver for sure. He's worn the seat out, and he's not a particularly fat guy either. That's part of the sides coming off, but these seats are still extremely comfortable seats. It's a fun little car to drive. Custom shifter stuck on it, that's kind of cool. Back in the day they had real keys, so you can just start them without any kind of crazy anti-theft stuff. Now listen, it's a racing Celica now, but that's because the other day got a hole in the exhaust. He's got to fix that. Over time, when you get as old as this thing is, you know, you push a 21-year-old car, things are going to break and you're going to need to fix that over time. But actually, the funny thing is, I got a bunch of customers that have old Toyotas, especially Corollas. They get holes like that. They leave them because they think it sounds more like a race car. But he didn't make it that way. It's just got a hole in it. And you can see it's got 322,101 miles on it. Engine light's on, so we're going to check that part. Got a sunroof on it. Close that. Then I won't get glare in my head. And they actually have quite a bit of leg room in the front. Now, as for leg room in the back, no, they're about a spray bottle wide. This is made for small children and dogs at best, and even small dogs at that. You can see he's upgraded. He's got a JVC stereo. The stereos that they put in were pretty crappy, so you'd want to upgrade it. But it still has power windows, and they still work. And as we can see in the back, a two-handed job. There we go. Well, he definitely needs no struts in the back. Hold it up in one hand and look, and you can see they got a nice trunk, and when you flip the seats down, it's pretty much a hatchback. It's got nice disc brakes in the back and in the front. Lived in Massachusetts all these years, so you can see now there's superficial rust here, but generally the bodies don't often have too many problems because Toyota, even back in these days, pretty much knew how to coat the metal, so you don't get all these rust pockets on them, and it doesn't have any. So for $7,000, he's got 220-something thousand miles worth of driving, but the check engine light's on, so let's see what it says. Turn the idiot light on. Okay, this is his new U-Diag X90 Pro. Does the Toyota Celica 03 2ZZGE and a manual transmission. You can see it's all gone digital. Speedometer, everything's digital. It looks like it's analog, but it's actually all digital. You can see that's all analog. The whole thing's actually all digital. This is digital. Even the speedometer's digital. They just made it look like it's analog because the line moves. But believe me, it's all digital electronics. But it's still got a pretty simple heating system, easy to work on. Look, it's a Toyota Corolla. The AC still works on it, right? Now the check engine light's on because it's got 5 fault codes, so we'll see what they are. But even though he doesn't live in Tennessee where they don't inspect cars, he lives in Massachusetts. This is more than 20 years old, so he does not have to get this thing inspected. A big advantage for you people living in Massachusetts. Maybe get an old car where you won't get ripped off by the inspectors like they tried to rip my son off years ago when he used to live there and try to charge him a whole bunch of money. But I came Thanksgiving, and even though the owner of the shop didn't know where I was, his mechanic did, so they immediately passed the car that they had failed the week before when I wasn't in town. But still, the woman after us had a 3-year-old Silverado, and they wanted to hit her for $2,500 worth of suspension and shock absorber work that the truck obviously did not need. So if you can stay away from those places, you're better off. Okay, here we go. Evaporative emission system, incorrect purge flow, leak, evap control system, catalyst low efficiency bank 1. Well, it runs fine. It gets 32 miles a gallon, so he doesn't care. Now, if he had to get it inspected, he would have to fix all that stuff. And knowing how these things go, since it does burn a little bit of oil, I'm sure the catalytic converter is indeed inefficient. You'd have to buy a catalytic converter. You'd have to find and fix that stupid evap leak that can take hours to do. But in this case, he doesn't care because it runs perfectly fine. So he can just ignore the whole thing. That's the big advantage, like I said. If you have a car and it's old enough that it's grandfathered in and doesn't have to do emissions testing, hey, why not keep it driving forever? Think of the money and headaches that you'll save. He doesn't care about any of this. We'll start it up and we'll look at live data. Maybe that's an older car. It's a decent machine, this X90. It's got all kinds of stuff. The milliseconds of the fuel injectors. That's all normal. It's color-coded, too. Black is good. The total fuel trim is 1.012%. That's not bad for a car that's got 322,000 miles on it. Now, part of the reason that the check engine light's on, especially for the catalytic converter, you can see the oxygen sensor data is all 0. And he had a custom exhaust put on. So I'm assuming the guy probably didn't even hook them up, because if you look here, here's the oxygen sensor voltage. They're both 0. So I'm assuming he didn't even connect them. See, all 4 cylinders, no misfires whatsoever. Again, the oxygen sensor data is all 0, so They've either been disconnected or unplugged, one or the other. Most of the data's good, at least it's up that has data for. And getting 32 miles on the highway, you can't complain. So let's take it for a spin. Now, it sure makes a little noise because it's got an exhaust leak, but other than that, it's still a pretty smooth riding car. Nice size steering wheel. Now, you're going to hear rattles. That was one of the downfalls of the Toyota Celica. The previous version, this is the last version, so the Pan Ultimate version, the one that I have, the 94, is pretty solid, doesn't make all that much rattling noise. But they made these a lot cheaper. They actually were thousands of dollars cheaper than the previous model. And it kind of showed. They're more rattly, kind of like a Ford Mustang, you know? They're more rattly, and that kind of turned people off. And like I said, these aren't race cars. They never were meant to be race cars. They look kind of racy, but they're not. Here we go. Once you get in the higher RPMs, you get acceleration, but like I said, they aren't race cars, and that was their demise. Guys that wanted to race them around would get them going all the time, 4, 5, 6,000 RPMs, but then a lot of people blew the engines in them. It's still a fun little car to drive around with, 300,000 miles. Being to handle quite well, they always did, and this one still does. And typical of the Toyota Corolla design, the brakes still work perfectly fine, and this, as I showed you earlier, has disc front and back. So this has really good braking capabilities. So up the hill we go. Easy shifting. The guy did a really good job building this transmission for him. Like I say, it's got a different 6th gear, so it gets better gas mileage. And I'm driving this with one hand on the camera, one hand on the wheel. So, if I can shift it like that, you're going to have no problems when you're using 2 hands driving. It's still a lot of fun to drive around. Engine's still original. He did the transmission over, and in that respect, he's thinking if this engine ever does go out, he's going to go to the monkey wrench guys and have them put a race engine and put a supercharger on it and have a lot of fun with it, which is totally doable. If you want to put the money in, you don't have to, but being a Toyota Corolla base, these things can run forever. It's an everyday driver. It still looks pretty sharp. If you can find one that's been taken care of, just heed my warning. Have a mechanic check the engine out before you do anything. Cause a lot of these, the guys have ratted through the engines, and they're not worth buying if they have this engine. Now, some of them, it's kind of weird. This is the 1.8 liter engine. Some of them have a different engine, and the different engine didn't have any problems at all. The different engine is the same one that's in my Matrix, and those things run forever. It can be a great deal, as long as you listen to what I said and follow my advice to the T. Because you don't want to get one with a bum engine. It's going to cost you a fortune to fix it, right? Now, he's gotten so much out of his $7,000 investment, you know, 220,000 miles. He can't complain no matter what happens now. But that engine still seems real solid to me. Burning a quart of oil, every oil change, that's nothing. Doesn't smoke or anything. The AC still works. So, hey, an interesting car if you can find one that still has an engine that's working in it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.